Welcome to my channel. Subscribe and enjoy daily stories about cheating, revenge, and relationship advice. The living room was eerily quiet as I sat in the dim light of the street lamp filtering through the blinds. My mind was a storm of rage and confusion, each tick of the clock echoing the seconds of waiting. Tonight was supposed to be a quiet evening, but instead, it had become a battleground. I had suspected for weeks that something was amiss. Clara had become increasingly distant, her phone always hidden and her evenings out more frequent. I had done my homework, tracking calls, saving messages, and even taking discreet photos. Each piece of evidence felt like a dagger, but tonight was the moment of truth. The sound of the front door creaking open jolted me from my thoughts. Clara's laughter drifted in, soft and tinkling, followed by the muffled sounds of a man's voice. My heart raced as I gripped the photos and messages, my breath catching in my throat. I had to confront her. I heard her footsteps approach the living room, the rustle of her coat as she hung it up in the closet. The moment she stepped into the light, her smile faltered. She looked up, her eyes meeting mine with a mixture of surprise and fear. "John." Her voice was a whisper, her face paling as she took in the scene before her. I stood up, holding the evidence in my hands. "Clara," I began, my voice low and steady despite the storm raging inside me, "I need you to explain these." I tossed the photos and printed texts onto the coffee table between us. The images were damning, Clara in intimate poses with another man, messages that spoke of love and plans for a future together. The reality was laid bare before her, and I watched as her face flushed with a blend of guilt and anguish. Her gaze darted between the photos and my face, her hands trembling slightly. "John, I can explain." "Explain?" I echoed, my voice rising. "How do you explain this? How do you justify the lies and the deceit?" Clara's eyes welled up with tears, her voice trembling. "John, it wasn't supposed to happen like this. I didn't want you to find out this way." I took a deep breath, struggling to maintain control. "How long, Clara? How long have you been seeing him? How long have you been lying to me?" Her shoulders slumped as she sank into the couch, her tears falling freely now. "It's been a few months. I didn't mean for things to get so out of hand. It just happened. I repeated, incredulous. "You think that makes it okay? That somehow excuses the betrayal?" "I never wanted to hurt you," Clara pleaded, her voice cracking. "I thought I could manage it, keep it from you. I thought I could handle everything." I shook my head, feeling a cold emptiness settle in my chest. "Clara, you've shattered the trust between us. This isn't something we can just fix with apologies." She reached out a hand, her voice desperate. "Please, John, don't do this. We can work through this. I'm willing to try." "No," my voice was firm, a finality that left no room for argument. I can't just forget this. You've broken something that can't be repaired." Clara's sobs grew louder, her pleas increasingly frantic. "John, please. I'm so sorry. I love you. I'll do anything to make this right." But as I looked at her, the woman I had once trusted, now a stranger in my eyes, I knew there was no going back. I turned away, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders as I walked out the door, leaving her behind in the silent wreckage of our home. The days following the confrontation were a blur of tension and heartache. Our once warm and welcoming home had become a battleground, filled with silence and bitter arguments. The emotional fallout of Clara's betrayal was overwhelming, and the house seemed to echo with the unspoken pain between us. One evening, after a long day of sorting through my emotions and trying to come to terms with the reality of our situation, Clara and I found ourselves sitting at the dining table. The table, once a symbol of family and togetherness, now felt like a courtroom, a place where our fractured relationship was laid bare. Clara sat across from me, her posture slumped, her eyes red and tired from days of crying. I could see the remnants of her makeup streaked down her face, a visual representation of the facade she tried to maintain. The air between us was thick with the weight of unsaid words. "John, can't we just talk about this? Clara's voice was soft, her eyes pleading. I want to understand how we got here and if there's any chance to fix this. I took a deep breath, struggling to maintain my composure. We've talked enough, Clara. What more is there to say? You've been unfaithful, and it's not just a matter of fixing things. You've shattered the trust that we built over years. Clara's eyes welled up with tears as she reached out a trembling hand. Please, John. I never meant to hurt you. I thought I could keep everything under control. I didn't want this. You didn't want this. I echoed, my voice rising with frustration. Clara, you made choices. You actively deceived me and betrayed our vows. I can't just ignore that. Clara's tears spilled over, and she buried her face in her hands. I was scared, John. Scared of losing you, scared of everything. I thought I could manage it all. I'm so sorry. Her apologies felt like empty words, echoes of a regret that came too late. I had tried to find a way to reconcile, to salvage something from the wreckage, but her actions had left a deep scar that I couldn't overlook. I don't know if you understand how deep this betrayal goes, I said quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. It's not just about the affair. It's about the lies, the deceit, and the complete disregard for our marriage. Clara's sobs grew louder, her voice breaking through the haze of her grief. I know. I'm so sorry. I'll do anything to make it right. Please, John, don't do this. We can still make this work. I shook my head, feeling a profound sense of sadness. Clara, it's not about what you're willing to do now. It's about what you've already done. I can't just forget the way you've hurt me. I stood up from the table, feeling the weight of the decision I had to make. I think it's best if we separate, Clara. I need space to think and to heal. Clara looked up, her face a mask of desperation. John, please. Don't do this. We can get through this. We can fix it, but the finality in my voice left no room for debate. I'm sorry, Clara. I need to move forward, and that means letting go. As I walked away, leaving Clara alone at the table, I felt a cold emptiness in my chest. The house that had once been filled with laughter and love was now a place of sorrow and broken dreams. I knew that moving forward wouldn't be easy, but I had to begin the painful process of healing and rebuilding my life, one step at a time. The weeks following our separation were filled with a numb routine of packing up the remnants of a shared life and attempting to regain some semblance of normalcy. I had managed to establish a fragile sense of peace, but the feeling was shattered one day when Jenna, a former colleague of Clara's, reached out to me. Her voice on the phone was tinged with urgency, and she asked to meet. When Jenna arrived, I could see the strain in her eyes. She had been Clara's co-worker years ago, but the stories she was about to tell were far from the mundane office gossip I'd expected. We met at a small cafe, a neutral ground where we could speak openly. Jenna's face was pale, and her hands shook slightly as she stirred her coffee. John, she began, her voice low and cautious, I don't know how to say this, but I need to tell you something about Clara. Something you might not know. I leaned forward, my curiosity piqued despite the lingering bitterness. What is it? What more could there possibly be? Jenna took a deep breath, her eyes meeting mine with a mixture of regret and determination. Clara wasn't just having an affair. She was involved in a scam, a sophisticated con game. She targeted wealthy men, gained their trust, and then took off with their money. She's been doing this for years. My heart sank as her words settled in. The idea of Clara being a con artist was almost too much to grasp. A scam? Are you serious? How could she have been involved in something like this? Jenna nodded, her expression pained. I was part of the team that first uncovered her activities. Clara was always clever about covering her tracks, but once we started piecing things together, it became clear that she was orchestrating this entire scheme. I felt a mix of anger and disbelief. So, all this time, she wasn't just betraying me personally, she was exploiting others as well. Jenna's face tightened. Yes. And I'm afraid that there are more victims out there, men who have lost everything because of her. I thought you should know the full truth. The revelation hit me hard. Clara's betrayal was not just a personal affront, it was a widespread deceit that had ruined lives. The weight of it felt crushing, but it also ignited a new resolve within me. I couldn't let this go unpunished. Do you have any evidence? I asked, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Anything that could help bring her actions to light. Jenna nodded, pulling out a folder from her bag. I have documents, financial records, and even some communications that could be crucial. I've been working with a few others to compile everything. I took the folder from her, feeling the gravity of the situation. Thank you, Jenna. I need to see this. I need to understand the full extent of what she's done. As I flipped through the documents, my mind raced with the implications. Clara's deceit was more extensive than I had imagined, and the scope of her betrayal was staggering. The realization that she had not only hurt me but also exploited others fueled my determination to see justice served. John, Jenna said softly, I know this is a lot to take in. But if we work together, we can ensure that she faces the consequences of her actions. I looked up at her, my resolve firm. We will. I won't let her get away with this. I'll help you take this to the authorities. It's time that Clara's actions are exposed, and that she's held accountable for the damage she's done. Jenna nodded, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. Thank you. I appreciate your willingness to see this through. As we left the cafe, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The path ahead would be difficult, but I was determined to see justice done and to ensure that Clara's deceit was brought into the light. The road to healing might be long, but with this new information, I had a clearer direction, and I was ready to confront whatever came next. The decision to pursue justice against Clara and her scam was not one I took lightly. With Jenna's crucial evidence in hand, I began collaborating closely with the police. The process was complex, requiring meticulous attention to detail and a level of perseverance I hadn't anticipated. But each step forward, however small, felt like a victory in the pursuit of accountability. The first meeting with Detective Harris was pivotal. He was a grizzled veteran with a no-nonsense attitude, and he quickly grasped the gravity of Clara's operations. As we sat in his dimly lit office, surrounded by stacks of case files and old coffee cups, I laid out the evidence Jenna had provided. This is extensive, Detective Harris said, scanning through the documents and photos. It looks like Clara was operating a sophisticated scam. We'll need to corroborate this with testimonies from the victims and track down any remaining assets. I nodded, feeling a mix of determination and trepidation. I want to make sure that every aspect of her fraud is exposed. There's also a broker named Victor who's heavily involved. I've heard he's connected to the scam. Detective Harris's eyes narrowed. Victor? We've been looking into him for a while. He's a key player in this kind of scheme. If we can tie him to Clara's operation, it'll significantly strengthen the case. The days turned into weeks as the investigation progressed. I worked closely with Jenna, helping to track down additional victims and gather more evidence. Each discovery seemed to unveil a new layer of deception, and the more we uncovered, the clearer it became that Clara had been deeply entrenched in her criminal activities. One evening, as Jenna and I were reviewing more documents, she looked up with a worried expression. John, I've heard that Victor is getting suspicious. He knows we're closing in on him. We need to move quickly before he gets wind of the investigation. I felt a surge of urgency. What do we do? How do we ensure we catch him before he disappears? Jenna took a deep breath, her voice steady despite her concern. We need to coordinate with the police to set up a sting operation. If we can get Victor in the act, it will be easier to build a case against both him and Clara. I agreed, and we worked with Detective Harris to plan the operation. The night of the sting was tense, with officers positioned around the warehouse where Victor was known to conduct his illicit dealings. I was there as an observer, the weight of the operation pressing heavily on me. As the raid unfolded, the scene was chaotic but controlled. Police officers stormed in, apprehending Victor and his associates with precision. I watched as Victor, handcuffed and defiant, was led away by officers. It was a moment of grim satisfaction, knowing that one of the key players in Clara's scam was finally being held accountable. Detective Harris approached me once the scene had calmed down. "We've got Victor in custody, and his connections to Clara's scam are now undeniable. This will greatly strengthen our case against her." I sighed, a mixture of relief and exhaustion washing over me. "Thank you, Detective. It's been a long road, but seeing Victor apprehended feels like a significant step toward justice." Jenna joined us, her face pale but determined. "What's next? What happens with Clara now?" Detective Harris's expression softened slightly. "We'll be using the evidence we've gathered to build a comprehensive case. Clara will face charges for her involvement in the scam, and will ensure that she's held accountable for the damage she's caused." As the operation wrapped up, I felt a profound sense of closure beginning to settle in. The pursuit of justice had been arduous, but it had brought me a renewed sense of purpose. With Victor in custody and Clara's criminal activities exposed, I could finally start to envision a future beyond the shadow of her betrayal. As I walked away from the warehouse, Jenna at my side, I felt the support of friends and family bolstering me. The path to healing would be long, but with each step, I felt more prepared to face the challenges ahead and rebuild my life with a sense of hope and determination.